Welcome back to Printer Pan with Pablo. I'm Pablo, and today we're going to be looking at 3 new films. First up, Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. I saw this on a whim and didn't have very high expectations, especially after seeing Godzilla Minus One. I anticipated this to have some decent fights and a pretty lame story and flat characters, and yeah, I was mostly right. This film is pretty much everything you'd expect from a standard monster film, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. The story is pretty whatever, there's not much to it, and it's mostly a means to an end for the fights to happen. The characters somewhat surprised me though. There's not much to them, but I like their chemistry, and I thought they worked decently off each other. Obviously, you're coming for the action, and yeah, it's pretty good. You get a lot of Kong action here. Godzilla gets less screen time and a significantly smaller story role, but its fights are cool too. The CGI is quite strong and helps accentuate a lot of the action. Overall, you can tell if this is something you'd be into. If you want a monster film with epic action and a great story, see Godzilla Minus One. If you just want the epic action part, this should do the job. 5 out of 10, check it out if you're interested. Next, I saw Spy Family Code White. So this came out in Japan at the end of last year, but just recently came over to the US. The film is a continuation of the Spy Family, or who knows, anime and manga, which are currently ongoing. Spy Family follows a husband and wife, Lloyd and Yor Forger, and their daughter Anya, who are really a spy and assassin who are trying to keep their identities a secret, with Anya being a psychic who can read minds and knows both their secrets. Code White follows their winter weekend getaway, where they must fight enemy agents, protect government secrets, and most importantly, eat a cake. If you've seen the anime, this film is pretty much what you'd expect. It's lighthearted, with colorful visuals, and some pretty strong comedy. There are a lot of goofy moments that make the film very enjoyable to watch. The animation is pretty good as well. The colors pop, and the action is really smooth. There are a few moments that feel a bit more cinematic than the show, but it generally feels like an extended episode visually. If I had any complaints, it's primarily that the film has pretty uneven pacing. The first half is pretty fast, but the second half, especially the climax, felt like it could have been 15 minutes shorter. It also has little impact on the show's plot, which may or may not bother you depending on your opinions on slice of life. Overall, the film is pretty simple, but pretty solid time. If you love Spy Family or like goofy, wholesome comedies, I would recommend watching it. 6 out of 10, check it out if you're interested. And now the big one, Kung Fu Panda 4. I'm a huge fan of the Kung Fu Panda films, so when a 4th one was announced, I was really worried. 4th entries can either be kind of bad, like Indiana Jones 4, Ace Attorney 4, or pretty good, like Resident Evil 4 or Ip Man 4. This film follows Po having to hand down the mantle of Dragon Warrior to someone else, and teaming up with a fox to stop the shape-shifting chameleon. So let's start with the positives. The animation is amazing, and probably the best in the series. The fights especially are really smooth, and this film adds a lot of visual flair that makes them pop more than usual. Now the bad. This film overall feels really empty. Po is pretty likable as always, but he doesn't really go through an arc. You try a bunch of things, from having him be afraid of change, trying to be wiser and learning about trust, but none of them feel that well developed. The same goes for most of the side characters. The fox, whose name I forgot that should tell you something, Shifu, and Po's dads don't have a whole lot to do. The villain especially feels really underdeveloped. Without spoilers, she doesn't get a lot of screen time, isn't developed as a threat until the 3rd act, and her motivations aren't horrible, but they're very basic and especially pale in comparison to the other films. The humor is really hit or miss. Some jokes are great, but a lot just kind of fall flat, mainly because they don't have the same energy that the other films had. Pacing is also terrible. The first 2/3 are very slow, and the 3rd act rushes so many important story elements. Overall, this film just feels really disjointed. It has a lot of strong parts, and there are points where I could tell it could have had a really strong story. But ultimately, the film just doesn't do much with them. Honestly, if this movie had a stronger, tighter story with its incredible animation, this could have had a shot at being the strongest film in the series. It's still a Kung Fu Panda movie. It's not a bad movie, but as it is, it's easily the weakest of the franchise. Worst of all, it just doesn't add much to the series, and I can't really recommend it. 6 out of 10, skip it.